Christmas greetings from Hopalong Hollow. This is Jerry. This is part 2 of Edwardian Christmas. Now, before we begin a craft project for the day, we're going to cook a meal that would have been enjoyed easily by the Edwardians, and it's a very old recipe because it was created, chicken and dumplings, in the late 19th century in the South. And since we live in the South, in East Tennessee, we think it would be pretty appropriate. The recipe for the dumplings is coming directly out of a cookbook from 1912. And then afterwards, we are going to create these delightful scrap ornaments. Scrap, which would have been highly available for the Edwardians to make these really fun and rather elegant, really, ornaments for your Christmas. So let's start with the recipe. A recipe for the day is going to be chicken and dumplings. This is called the Mary Frances Cookbook, and it's called Adventures Among the Kitchen People. This was meant for young girls to learn all about cooking implements and cooking times and temperatures, how to use the oven, how to use all your modern equipment in the kitchen, and simply how to learn how to cook and to bake. And all the illustrations in the book, created by Jane Eyre Fryer. She did many Mary Frances books. We have a Mary Frances garden book, a Mary Frances sewing book, but the characters in this book are all the pots and the pans. So it's a lot of fun. This copyright on the book 1912, as you can see, and these are just charming little books. They don't have a whole lot of recipes in it, but basically it was just a fun way to get children to learn how to cook. And I am making my own chicken and dumpling recipe. I'm making my own chicken recipe, but I'm going to get the dumpling recipe out of this cookbook by using the biscuit recipe and doubling it. So thimble biscuits is a recipe here. I'm going to double the recipe, and I'm going to use this to make my dumplings. Recipes in here such as the tea party, a man's lunch, Mary Frances gets dinner, jacket boiled potatoes, mashed potatoes, baked potatoes, potato soup, all kinds of egg recipes, how to make coffee, how to make tea, how to make an omelet, thimble biscuits, baking powder biscuits, and on it goes. And the kitchen people are all introduced here. These are the characters in the book: the tea kettle, the saucepan, the boiler pan, and, well, you get the picture. So our dumpling recipe is actually a biscuit recipe from the Mary Frances Cookbook, 1912. But it really is so close to being a dumpling recipe that I think it'll work out just fine. The only difference between a normal dumpling recipe is this one calls for a little bit of butter. And actually, I think that'll make it a lot tastier. So we're going to do 2 cups of flour, sifted flour, to make them light and fluffy, and 1 tablespoon of baking powder, and 1 cup of cream, You might need a little more cream. This might not be enough. In fact, I think I might add just a bit more cream, because I'm also going to add just a tablespoon of butter. I think that'll make it just the right consistency. I'm going to roll these into 1-inch balls and drop them into the simmering pot of chicken soup, I guess you could call it. The dough is really sticky, so wet your hands with water as you roll them into the balls, and don't let them touch. Just leave this simmering on the stove. This takes about 15 minutes for the dumplings to cook, but you can leave it on low all day long, and this is going to be a great luncheon accompaniment for us as we work on our Edwardian, I almost said Victorian, on our Edwardian project. These dumplings expand quite a bit in size. It started out as a 1-inch dumpling, and now it's about a 2 or 3-inch dumpling. So you can make them smaller than this if you prefer. We're going to start out by flipping through a book called Christmas Collectibles, and this book is a treasure trove of antique Christmas ornaments and decorations, beginning around the 1890s and going all the way through the 1940s. So because Christmas was declared a legal holiday in America in 1890, that puts us pretty close to our date for the Edwardian period that we're going to be in, which is 1901 or 1900, let's say 1900 to 1914. So many of the decorations and the little figurines and such that you see in these books really do date from that period, because that was the time when this stuff really took off. And many of these things, in fact, almost all of our traditions were influenced by the cultures that moved to America. So we have German influence, Swedish, Scandinavian, English, French, all sorts of influences. But we're skipping ahead as we go through this book. We are skipping ahead. Oh, here we have some wonderful feather trees, which, by the way, we're going to be making a feather tree, but not today. We want to skip ahead. We want to go through these beautiful German Kugels, which were blown glass. I mean, some of these sorts of ornaments are just absolutely, if you're a collector, they're just worth a fortune. Glass birds, which we all love. But we're going to do something today that was done at home by the family or by ladies groups using something called scraps. We're going to create something called scrap ornaments. Now, if you've ever seen scrap ornaments before, they're usually associated with the Victorian age, but the fact of the matter is these were most popular during the early 1900s and all the way up to World War I. So these really are what I consider not Victorian ornaments, but Edwardian ornaments. And what we're going to be using are die cuts, scraps, Dresdens, tinsel, all manner of laces and ribbons to create what sometimes look a little bit gaudy, but not ours. Ours are not going to be gaudy. Ours are going to be absolutely charming. And I'm going to show you right now what you're going to need to create these. But first, let's take a peek at a couple more of these scrap ornaments. Now, these beautiful images that you see of the angels and the figures and the ladies and the children and the St. Nicholas, these were from chromolithography. This was a process that was perfected in the 1840s, and before long, years later, you were able to purchase what you call die cuts. Now, these scraps or die cuts were generally printed on one side and blank on the other, therefore enabling you to take them apart and put them in your scrapbook or use them for ornamentation. This one obviously has a springtime theme. I want to show you some original antique scraps that I have. Now, these are actual antique scraps, probably from the early 1900s, the Edwardian time. This is my favorite. the piece, the sheet, is still intact. And what I love about it, obviously, is that it's farming things. Milk cans, farmers, livestock, fences, bee skeps, a farmhouse. It's a wonderful, wonderful piece. I'll never cut it apart. I just put it in a frame and hang it on the wall. These are also some really nice little scraps. Now, I don't want to use these because they're very delicate. So we're going to be using scraps that you can still buy today. They're made in Germany. They're available online. I'll give a link below, but they're just as beautiful as these and come in so many varieties. You're going to have a very difficult time choosing the scraps that you want. So here we have another springtime theme. And the most desirable for making ornaments would be these lovely little children. Some of them can be rather large. Little snow angels. There's a snoring dog in the room, as usual. Look at these. These are a nice size, but they're rather small. And another thing we're going to be using are called Dresdens, and these are so stunning. Doves, silver doves. Of course, as you can see, they all come apart. I'm going to find a way to use these beautiful swans, these majestic lions. Now, Dresdens were embossed and raised so as to look 3D. And my favorite of all, we have a sheet of hares. I don't know what we'll do with these yet, but this is going to be fun. Something else we'll be using are a lot of trims. These Dresden trims can also be purchased from the website that I'm going to link to. And boy, are some of these stunning. But you can also get a lot of items right out of your sewing box or your craft box, because tinsel is something else that was used quite frequently in scrap ornaments. Crepe paper. Ribbons, roses, old buttons, spun cotton. This was very, very popular in the Edwardian ornaments. And all manner of little laces and doilies. Look at this. I think this is going to be pretty charming on somebody's little dress or coat. Easy to acquire. These are doilies, easy to acquire, coming in silver, gold, and white. Now, there's one thing about these. They're sort of glitzy, and although I love to do a pioneer Christmas, an early American Christmas, and a very plain Christmas, these are just fun to make. So this is a little bit different than something we would normally do, but a lot of fun. So we have glitter, we have very metallic looking threads, lots of different kinds of trim. But we also use old cotton. And in this box, we also have tissue paper, crepe paper. Now, to make the clothing on your figures, you're going to want crepe paper. And this crepe paper has been around for a long time, and it's just perfect because it really has taken on age. And that's probably because I've had it for about 15 years or so at least. So crepe paper is perfect for making clothing. Tissue paper also, very light and easy to work with. All sorts of tissue paper. I think this was pattern making paper. So here we have a table full of things. But the most important thing you want to start with, and you've got to have glue. You'll need scissors. You can use a hot glue gun, but I just prefer to use good old white glue. And most importantly, you're going to need your image. Now, there are other ways to get your images besides purchasing them like this. And I will show you how I got my first images when I made these about 15 or 20 years ago. But I happen to have this book called Old Time Vignettes in full color. So I went through it. I found the ones that I liked. Found a lot of great images in here. Animals, people, objects. And the ones that I really liked, I cut them out. I cut them out like so. And then I printed them off on glossy paper on the computer. Here were the originals. This is what I printed out. And then taking the originals. Oh, I just love her. Isn't she cute? I mounted the originals on sort of a chipboard paper, something a little heavier, like this. Just give them a little more sturdiness, and then cut them out. So you've got a nice hard backing here, and you've got a nice stiff print. Now, another thing that you can get, and you can copy these right offline. I'll also give you the link to this site where you will be able to copy out this entire doll, which is put together with grommets. You can print it out. This site was called the VictorianOrnaments.com. And this was the size they are printed out. And as you can see, you've got arms, legs, and heads. So you're basically making a paper doll here, and then you're going to dress that doll. So I printed it out and made the copies, glued them onto some nice hard stock, and was able to make several of the ornaments using these. Let me show you a couple of them. Here you can see this lady right here and her body parts. And I was able to make a lovely Lady Liberty. The little doll face came off something that I printed online and made a cute little snow baby. And this one was made with crepe paper, ribbon, a basket, and tissue paper. So let's get on with it, and I'll show you how much fun these are to make, because really, you can have just your imagination. It's your imagination is the limit. So you can make them more subdued and sweet like this, or you can just go all out like many of the Edwardians and the Victorians did and make them kind of flashy and, I don't know, kind of gaudy, actually. I don't really care for gaudy, but I do love these simple ones like this. So let's get started on one. I recommend that you have a nice sharp pair of manicure scissors to cut out your scrap. If you're printing it out on paper like this, and then a nice sharp straight pair of scissors, and of course your glue needs to be handy, a couple Q-tips, maybe some little wooden sticks to apply it, and you're ready to go. Let's start out with something really simple, something simple enough for a child to do. So if you're working with kids today, this is a good place to go. We're just using a scrap, and we're using a piece of tinsel. And tinsel was pretty accessible to the Edwardians. You can also get it today. You can still get it today as these tinsel pipe cleaners. So we've taken a piece of tinsel and twisted it together on the ends. I'm going to shape it into the number 8 and give it a twist. And then I'm going to shape the upper and the lower circle here into a heart. Nice little heart shape. Either end. Twist it around, make it sure it's nice and tight. There you've got 2 little hearts. Next we're going to take our piece of scrap that we choose, and I'm using these connected scrap ornaments. I'm going to take a little kitty this time. This is where your manicure scissors really come in handy, because you can carefully cut these apart. Dab of glue right in the middle of your 2 hearts. And just place your scrap on top of that. That easy. What you doing, puppy? What are you doing? I'm going to let that dry now. Now I'm going to take a couple of these that I have printed off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount them onto some cardstock. I'm just going to glue them very securely onto some cardstock to give them a little more stability. These three are the ones I want. Now these have been pasted down on the cardstock, and you'll notice that I've added a little bit more of a torso here so that we can add the fabrics and the cottons on top of this figure. Now you don't have to be really precise when you're cutting out this part of the body because it's probably going to be covered anyway. However, we might be cutting out her little hands to use those, for example. But when you're moving around the face, try to be a little more precise with your cutting, depending on what you plan on doing with it. As far as arms and legs, if you don't have any on your image, just roughly sketch some out. These will all be covered anyway with crepe paper and little shoes, so you can do a really loose sketch of legs and arms, and we will be using these too. You have a little bit of a sense as to where you're going to be going with this figure. So she's got her arms, she's got her legs. I think she'll be holding a cat. I've got some ribbon, some lace, some cotton. Let's start by gathering up the crepe paper like so. Cover her with glue from about the neck to about halfway down the torso. I've gathered up some crepe paper, and I'm going to give her a dropped waist garment because this is an little Edwardian girl. And I'm just going to glue it like so. Now I have put her dress all the way around because you want the back of these to look as good as the front. And I've given her a little bit of crochet trim on her collar. And this is like an Edwardian drop waist dress. So I'll put a piece of ribbon along this dropped waist. This is just old velvet. That's about the right size, and I'll take that all the way around. And all I'm using throughout this whole thing is glue. I'm going to make this ribbon long enough so that I can tie a nice little bow in the back for her. So I'll get it to the right length. You want the back of your little lady to look as nice as the front. And of course we will be putting a hat on her, so that will be taken care of. And the front is we're still working on the front. For her mittens, I'm going to use this dyed cotton batting and just cut out the shape of a little hand for her mitten. And I'm going to glue it right on top of that little arm that I made her. Okay, now we're going to make a sleeve just the same way as we made the dress by gathering the crepe paper, applying glue to the arm. Oops, I think I need a new Q-tip here. And I'm going to go slightly over the top of that arm so that you can bring it around the back as well. Now the arms, this side of the arms will not show because they will be pressed against her body, but you do want to make sure that it's gathered on the top. Now we'll tie it at the wrist with some of this metallic red thread. I have to thank my friend in Phoenix, Arizona, who sends me all kinds of threads, embroidery threads, and yarns, and all kinds of wondrous things. because a lot of these threads came from her. So I'm going to tie that and make a nice little bow in it. And then we will glue her mittened arms together because she's going to be holding something. Most likely some little berries. That's too much. She could even have a basket, but I think she'll have some berries. I'm going to stick with the crepe paper theme for the hat. So I've gathered it along one edge. I'm going to glue it and paste it to the back of her head. This is something you just figure out sort of as you go along. You're not quite sure what you're going to do until you just get down and do it. Now, I want to make this hat similar to the one that she's got on, and I want to use the mitten trim on the trim for the hat. So I'm just going to start bending this little hat over. Just like that. Something like that. And then we'll glue that down and we'll put a green trim around it. So there she's got her little hat, and I've cut a piece of cotton trim that will go all the way around the hat, including the back side. Now here I've got some bits of sheep's wool for her hair, which I'm going to put on the back, and a few little wisps on the front. The last thing we're going to do here, if the cat doesn't walk right in front of the picture, is I'm going to put a little bit of watered down glue on her hat and her shoulders. I'm going to sprinkle a little stardust on there. Actually, it's glitter. I thought you might come into the picture. And probably a little bit on her shoulders here. Oops. There. I've covered her legs in green crepe paper stockings, and when they're dry, the glue is still pretty wet right now, I will just use a black marker to create shoes or probably little black boots. And then glue them right underneath her dress. Now, because I really want to use her little hands and arms, because they do appear on this piece of scrap, I'm going to go ahead and cut around those so that I'm able to use them as I did in here. Now, if you don't want to do that, you can just make the arms the way we did in the first piece. I'm not going to detach them. I'm just going to cut around them so that I can lift them out and work with this piece. On second thought, I cut her arms completely off because I think it's easier to put the sleeves on if the arms are not attached to the body yet. Okay, so I'm going to wrap the tissue paper or the crepe paper all the way around her body now. Then I'm going to wrap her arms in sleeves. Sorry, you might hear some noise in the background, but that's just James listening to something. Okay, this camera just picks up every single sound. Now, obviously, her little outfit is way too long. We want to make it about equal. Her little coat is way too long, so we want to make it about even with this one. So we're going to cut it right about here. Okay, cover her little arm with glue. Gather up your crepe paper. You're going to put it up and over the back to make a bit of a shoulder. Gets a little bit messy. You don't have to worry about covering the entire back because it's not going to show. Okay, let that dry. Make those shoulders nice and rounded. And then we're going to put some cuffs on with either cotton or sheep's wool. So for the sake of time, I just went ahead and completed this. I've used tissue paper as a bonnet just by folding it up and bending it and flattening it up against the back of her head. I've used cotton batting around the trim for the bonnet, velvet ribbon. This is a die-cut kitty, and a little bit of that lace that we had. And so far we haven't really done anything terribly flashy, but I kind of like these simple, more simple crepe paper, cotton, wool, just simple ornaments. But we will get a little more glitzy here in a few minutes. We're on the second day of making our scrap ornaments, and we're going to use the patterns that you can run off of a website called Victorianornaments.com. You can pull off a page which will give you the information on how to make these particular jointed, like sort of like paper doll scrap ornaments. And you can actually run off the pattern off your printer. So I've got 3 paper dolls here, and they've been mounted on cardboard, cut into little pieces. And then I want to connect them by using a paper punch to punch the little holes to put these all together. And then I'm going to use eyelets, such as these little things right here. Small eyelets to connect them, or you can also use these little, I can't remember what these are called, but they're just the little pins that open up like this. I cannot remember the name of these. So you're going to put them together like this. It's kind of a shame to hide these sweet little hearts, so I actually prefer to use these because this will not show once you get this doll dressed. So you're going to put them all together, and then you're going to begin to dress them. And I really like the one that is on their sample page, which is a ballerina. The reason I really like that ballerina is because this photograph hangs in our bedroom. And this is a 1906 colorized photograph of a beautiful ballerina in pink and green. So I'm going to try to mimic this one on my scrap paper doll. I switched these out with the eyelets because they're just so easy to use. They don't protrude so much, so it'll be a lot easier to glue the crepe paper to this form. It's a good idea, I may have mentioned this before, to lay out your elements that you're going to use before you begin, especially if you're going to do something a little more elaborate like this one's going to be. So I've got my green crepe paper. It's amazing how close this green is to the green in the photograph. I've got 2 different pinks in crepe paper. I've got some filigree here, a little basket full of roses and ribbons. Going through my scrap bag, I found some netting, which is absolutely perfect for this ballerina skirt. Now I'm working with a really full skirt here, so what I've done, I simply gathered it together with my fingers really tightly, and I am going to glue her waist, and I'm going to maneuver this around her waist. And then, this is where some thread really comes in handy. I am actually going to tie it with a piece of thread. And that way, I can secure it and arrange all the little pleats. So I'm going to give her a lot of glue right here. And I will be putting it on the back when I get to the back of her. So, start sort of like right in the middle here. Gluing it and pressing it down. Now, being a ballerina, her skirt's going to be much shorter than an Edwardian lady would be. Going to gather that all the way around. Waist, and then I'll be able to flare that out after I've tied it on. Okay, so I'm going to tighten that on with a piece of thread right around the waist. Here we go. Okay, it's not easy working in these gloves, but my house is really cold. Now, as I get moving here, I will be able to flare this skirt out. But first, before I do that, I'm going to want to put on the lace. Now this, I think I'm going to have to stitch this on, and then I'm going to put one more layer of pink crepe paper of a different shade on top of this. Crepe paper is very pliable and cooperative. It's still a little delicate, and it can rip pretty easily. So I'm just making a couple layers of skirt here, and I'm going to glue them together. Now, you have to be really careful at this waistline so you can keep it small. Now the Victorian or the Edwardian women were known for extremely tiny waists, and that's because it was all the fashion to wear a corset. This waist will be covered with a belt. And we're going to do the same thing on the back. Then we'll put lace all the way around here, or some kind of filigree. This seems like a really girly craft, doesn't it? But it doesn't have to be, because using the other Dresdens, which we didn't get around to today, so many different things, so many different sorts of things can be made. Unfortunately, I just didn't have time to do it all. So here she is, almost finished. I'm going to put ribbons around her legs to make the ballet shoes, several more layers of crepe paper. I used the Dresden stars on her skirt. I used the little ribbon roses, more Dresden, more filigree, fabric filigree. I'm also going to give her a head of hair so she can match my beautiful photograph a little bit better. Now, she doesn't look as good on the back as the other ones do because she's white, just white. But you could probably do something about that. Oh, what a difference a beautiful head of hair makes, wouldn't you say? All she needs now is a rose in her hair. Well, it's really amazing what an Edwardian hairdo can do for a girl's looks. Isn't she beautiful now? I love Edwardian hair. So we've gone from making really simple Dresden and scrap ornaments to making something quite a bit more elaborate like this. So you can go as simple and complicated as you like. You can see the variety that you can get simply by using scraps, Dresdens, foils, old fabric, old filigree, old lace, old Christmas ornaments, tissue, and beautiful little faces, ribbons. There's just no end to it. Like I said, you can go really fancy or you can go very, very simple. Well, I wish I'd had a chance to use all the Dresdens and the ribbons and many more of the die cuts, but this video is already the longest one I've ever made, so I'm going to stop here. I would like to say this, this craft, these ornaments, were popular from about the 1880s all the way through 1914. But with the beginning of the war and tariffs on paper and war with Germany, you could no longer get these die cuts or these Dresdens that were imported from Germany. But by the 1920s, this particular kind of ornamentation, Christmas decorations, they were completely outdated. And people didn't want them anymore. They prefer to buy the glass baubles and all the store-bought decor. So if you do find old ones, you're getting a real treasure. But in the meantime, why don't you try to make some of these, because they really are fun. They really are beautiful. Make sure you sign all your pieces and pass them down throughout your family. So, from Hopalong Hollow, this is Jerry. At the next week, we're going to do something a lot more simple than this. Also, an Edwardian craft and an Edwardian dessert. So until then, from Hopalong Hollow, this is Jerry. We will see you again.